actually training their children to fight in this war. So already there's a way of communicating dissatisfaction in a violent way. People kind of band together, they're dissatisfied, and that is it's a comfort, but then on top of that, it's like an impetus to go do something. So I love being an academic to a degree, but I think I'm in a straitjacket all the time. I can't say anything without having empirical backed up research. Everything needs to be grounded in a certain type of way, which means that only certain types of knowledge qualify for evidence. How do I prove that when I went to the GP, the guy looked at me funny and said, the vulnerability that often young people are framed or labelled as being in that category is actually less about vulnerability, but like a lack of wisdom.
Feminists would say that. I don't think he is.
I don't think he's an extremist, no.
No more extreme than a feminist.
I think he's got extreme viewpoints, and I think...
Wait, hold on. The people who do the radicalising take the position of guardian and...
New questions every day, how's a brother supposed to sleep?
Listen, I give youngers books.
Trying to educate myself as I'm running through these streets.
There's no such thing as black and black crime.
You can hit us in the DMs if you want the smoke. Pew, pew, pew.
Not sure where the conversation's gonna go.
But did you do your research? Yeah, I wanna know.
That's the life of a domino. It's the
Domino
domino
effect.
effect.
Remember when I first moved down there, I went to like just get food at African shop. On a Friday, it was like Lagos. All the uncles were out there with Hennessy bottle blasting music. I was just like, where am I right now? It was crazy.
So outside of Tasties on a Friday, it's a show.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's amazing. It's actually a show.
Like I went there, I went down like there's that strip where outside Tasty, she got the Vietnamese older uncles outside. I'm thinking, is there like a motive?
No, this is a casual thing.
That's just them.
And I feel like I'm going to miss this when I go to the US. Like the kind of culture we've got in London is very different.
Are you moving permanently?
Yeah. My family, my parents live there. So yeah.
Where do they live?
So they live in Southern California.
That's nice.
So it's nice, but the culture is different. Like American culture is very different.
It's a bit scary. Like I went to America when I was in primary school to go visit some family.
Mike.
And we went to Arizona.
Oh yeah.
And we were at my cousin's house and the doorbell gone. And next minute I see her go into the side drawer, pull out a strap, put it in the back of her jeans.
Yeah, madness.
Have all the latches on the door and then open the door.
But that's gang business.
And then it was, hello, you're right, da-da-da-da-da. But it was so casual for them.
Yeah.
To pull out a strap
absolutely.
there. And me, as like an 8-9-year-old child, I'm like, Mummy, what the fuck's going on? Like,
You can have guns in the gym in Texas.
Well, that's it then.
My boy was telling me he went to Houston.
Yeah, open carry.
He says like people are training with their strap like while the gym.
That's cold. Are you dumb? That's cold. What? I dare man try run up on me.
And you know what I find so insane about it?
What? Relax, bro.
Is they sit there and they act like America's the land of the free, and that you're so free, you can go do what you want, you can think what you want, but. I watched an awful video the other day on TikTok of this woman who was basically saying that she's getting all of her school stuff for her son to start back in September, and that now she's like teaching him that he has to be the last in line in the school bells if they have a fire alarm, because statistically the children at the front of the fire alarm, when mass shooters come in, they use the alarm to draw the children out. They've got to have bulletproof backpacks. They won't give children light up shoes anymore because if they're hiding and the shoes go off, the government can find them. And I find it so crazy that it's meant to be such a liberal, free place, but your children can't go to school safely. What country are you free when you can't send your kids to school safely? I find it crazy.
Give me a strap. Yeah, me.
Well, sorry, we're in today with the icebreakers out the way. So we have a lovely guest to my right, Jess. Academic, would you say?
Yes, let's say that. Yeah.
So thank you. Welcome today.
Thank you for having me, you guys. It's a pleasure.
And on my left, we got the plant-based warrior.
Give me a strap.
And the vegan dickhead.
Haters got hate.
Burner Boy from Wish. Or B-Tech Burner Boy, whichever one you prefer. Inside the place, Ed's, aka Edicus.
Roasted at the start of every show, you know.
Then we got me, the most masculine host.
Don't let him catch you, Mr. 5'5" on Tinder. Yeah, liar. It's not the masculine man.
I'm like 5'8" and 3/4, but I have to say 5'9", innit? Get me. Round up.
I'm having to lie your height.
This is good maths. It's a hard life, man. But yeah, inside the place. Oh, let's get ready to.
Yeah. You know the
Yeah. Let's get ready to dominate.
Daisy, I really think you should warn people before you do that, because the fear in her face.
I've seen a couple of shows, but I'm like, I missed that bit.
No, that's the best part though.
But listen, we're back again with another fantastic episode with a fantastic guest. It's going to be another interesting conversation. But as we always need to, what's going on with the analytics?
So at the moment, obviously, it's dropped a bit because TikTok made the wonderful decision to take down our TikTok because we had Mr. Tommy Robinson on, which was a bit sad. But we're growing again. So everyone again that was following the TikTok, make sure you smash it again. Get back to 50K in no time. I'm giving that a month, Brizzy. What are you saying? Month we're back at about 50K. And yeah, so keep following on Spotify, leaving reviews. That boosts the algorithm, gets more views. You guys want us to do 2 episodes a week. There's a new feature on YouTube, which super thanks. So if you love the content, you want to show appreciation, just drop us a little $5, you know what I mean? It'll go to the foundation.
For hairlines.
Hairlines matters. You know, if you want a new hairline brought back like me, go to Harley Street, go in the foundation.
They better sponsor us, boy. But listen.
We're trying to send them Harley Street, not Turkey. So please
Exactly, I
comment,
want
like,
Harley
subscribe.
Okay, that makes sense. You know?
That's what I'm saying.
That's actually, that's a mantra.
We just like, we'll pick a random African child and then give him a hair transplant. You know what I'm saying? That's what we want.
No, but listen, yeah, we discuss controversial topics, yeah. I don't think today is going to be as controversial. Actually, no, today might be quite controversial.
Yeah.
Actually. But so like I said before, if you disagree with the content, that was just a fly. If you disagree with the content, comment, ask questions, debate us in the comments, because we're here to advocate for civil discourse. Jordan Peterson said this: in order to learn, you have to risk being offensive. And that's what happens in order for us to grow and develop as individuals. So if you disagree, just comment. You don't need to report. There's no need for our account to get taken down for just spreading knowledge and information. So yeah.
And if you feel that strongly about reporting, why not reach out to us and come on the show and tell us your opinions yourself? Come and drop us a DM, say a bit about yourself, say why you disagree with it. And if we think that it's like, well, we think everything's valid, but if you've got something to say, we'd rather pull you on than get things
and
down.
leading on to that, our lovely manager Charis is now managing a lot of the emails. So rather than DMing us saying, yo bro, I got knowledge to spread, send us actually a nice constructed email. I know it's been a while since a lot of you have been in school, but just saying, this is what I'd like to talk about. This is why I think it's important. This is the work I've done. And then we'll get back to you if it makes sense.
Do put some context, because one of those emails like, I want to talk about this because I'm so great and I won't read it.
Our favourite one is the guy who said, I'm a god in this.
Yeah, I'm a god in this. Everybody knows me and all of this stuff. And when I put a message in the group chat, none of us knew him. And we all had to go and ask our friends, which,
that's terrible.
That to me.
That's really embarrassing.
Hey, are we not bringing him on?
I think we will, but I think we'll bring him on. But I think it's a case of constraining the things a little bit and not going to. We're not here to promote people, we're here to promote conversation. Yeah. So I don't care whether you've got 100,000 followers or you have 1 follower. If you have something interesting to say and you've got information, like yourself, you're academic, you can back your chat, we want to talk to you. That's it.
I only say like I'm a god in this if you're like Drake or Michael Jackson, like, otherwise it's not appropriate.
And even then it's debatable.
Yeah. But anyways, we're inside. Thank you. Sorry. Have you ever had the intro as exciting?
No, this is quite exciting actually. I think you've all got great personalities and great persona.
We're all a bit different, aren't we?
I like that. Yeah, you work together. So yeah.
So what we wanted to open a conversation about. Obviously, we wanted to talk broadly on youth extremism. And the work you do yourself. But one thing we wanted to talk about, a lot of people are interested in, is the emergence of Andrew Tate, the Manosphere, Red Pill, etc., and like your views on it. So like leading off, tell us a bit about you and the work that you've done related to this. Yeah,
like youth extremism. So I've always been interested in like community, how like social movements start, how information spreads. Like, how do we choose our family? That's always the concern I'm always thinking about. And that's what led me to look at youth extremism. Because often we're always thinking about, the internet, there's radicalisation happening on these platforms, but I always want to look at the cause. So I started to look at, from a sociological point of view, is it true that young people are vulnerable? That was my question. Are young people really, really vulnerable? When you're talking about Tate, I'm looking at like the people that follow him and the extent to which they're easily swayed, etc. So looking at it, I realized that, there is a lot of literature out there about young people being susceptible, vulnerable, these buzzwords, you know?
Mhm.
And I wanted to prove it. I wanted to see, okay, cool, is this really the case? So what I did was I started to look on Twitter to see what chatter was going on. Not to see whether radicalisation was taking place on the platform. We can get there if you want to talk about it.
Mhm.
But I wanted to see whether people were parroting the things that journals have said for years and years and years, right? What the media, like what print media have said for years and years. Is this really happening today? So I was on Twitter and collecting data about like just the general dialogue. But then I also thought I'd back this up by looking at other like NGOs and things. Like, have you heard of Prevent, anything countering extremism? I'm like, what are you lot saying as well? Let's compare and contrast the general discourse surrounding youth extremism. And what I found was interesting. People on Twitter are always talking about the same things. Yes, young people are vulnerable. Yes, people are easily swayed. Yes, the internet is a great like meeting place. But then there was this other discourse that came up as well that hadn't come up before in like the 70s, the 80s. And it was more like, no, young people are smart. No, young people can be empowered. No, young people have got a good head on their shoulders. There's this like notion of the smart youth. And that took me by surprise because I'm always thinking, no. We're young, you know, your formative years. Imagine what you were like in secondary school. Do you know what I mean? Like the formation of gangs, the formation of like, I don't know, like communities. So I was like, okay, that's interesting.
Sorry, I missed the part. So who was putting this rhetoric out? Sorry?
So everybody, like, so we've got NGOs, we've got usual just Twitter users, we've got young people themselves. But remember, on Twitter, to test everyone's identity is difficult. So it's just Twitter essentially, apart from like from people's profiles that I can look at.
burner accounts and
Exactly, it's just a Twitter community. But I did content analysis, so I basically broke down maybe like 2-3 million tweets, literally, and like basically coded and categorized them. And I realized, so I could see the themes.
Yeah.
Like it was straight 50-50. People were saying they're susceptible or they're super, super, super like smart. And I was like,
Which actually kind of makes sense. Like when you were first saying that in my head, it was just like ticking away. Like, how could that be? But actually, when I think about it, the most resilient time of my life was my teenage years. It's the most time where you can mess up, come back, fail, pick up.
Interesting.
You're kind of expected to almost mess up when you're younger, so you don't have that fear.
Yeah.
Like I almost compare it to like a theme park. When you're a child, you'll go on every ride. You want to be at the front. You want to like go crazy. But the older you get, the more like,
you're more risk averse.
Let me just sit behind this one. And I think as we get older, there's like a fear that in essence comes into us. So I think what you're saying about it being more split down the middle, it does actually make sense. Because people are more resilient when they're younger and they're more flexible.
And leading on that, like, how many roadmen do you know when they were younger at 17, they wanted to be Mr. Gangbanger, and now you see them wearing shirts, going into Central, just selling Forex and going to church on a Sunday. Yeah. And that all comes with time.
Yeah, it comes with time, comes with maturity. But this is what links me to the initial concern of family. When I started looking at it, I was thinking, okay, cool. Why do young people go into these things? Like, is it because they feel they were led to, or is it because they're looking for something?
Yeah.
So that kind of informed how I was looking at the data. But yeah, so that's what I do. I was looking at just how people are talking about youth. And then it led me to think, okay, cool. Now I know how people are talking about it. What's actually happening in this space? So yeah.
So what would you say is happening in this space?
If I'm honest, are you asking me like, is it like, are people being radicalized on these spaces? I'll be honest with you. I think the internet is a great tool. I think social media is a great tool, but I don't think it is the cause. I don't think it's where radicalisation like begins.
Why do you draw that analysis or conclusion?
Yeah. So I was looking at the Manchester Ariana Grande bombing, looking into that family dynamic. But he had the bomber himself, and he had a younger brother who's in prison. But their family were actually fleeing Libya, and they fled Libya because Gaddafi was doing a lot, and they were actually training their children to fight in this war. So already there's a way of communicating dissatisfaction in a violent way already. So to see that kind of cannot continue in the same context, but the same sort of principle playing out later, I was like, cool. Yeah, they're talking about this one on the internet. Sure, there is an internet, you know, there's some sort of influence there, but the idea is maybe something that they were exposed to at an earlier stage. Go ahead.
Bring in another example though. Say Michael Adebolajo, the one that did the killings in Woolwich. But him, Nigerian, not even Nigerian Muslim, Nigerian Christian family, maybe he's a bit simple, you could say. What about for him? Because
okay, so this is good. What my research did find was when it came to the internet and like lone wolves and people doing things by themselves, like going off on a whim, the internet was very helpful in kind of fermenting a certain like sentiment. So I'd say in his case, I wouldn't say he's simple. I think he was more calculated, more, I'd say maybe a scattergun approach, but he still acted not alone, but he's slightly different to the kind of groups of people that go. I don't really know if it was massively like digital. When was it? It was like 2012?
it was a while ago.
Like 2012, I was at uni. Yeah, 2012, around that time. I'd say that if the internet had anything to do with it, it would be helping lone wolves kind of like, I don't know, solidify and cement their plans, I'd say.
What about the, sorry, I'm testing you now.
That's
on the cases. The guy who wrote the manifesto for the New Zealand mosque killings. Because I read the first front page of... So what was he, would you say he's a lone wolf or would you say he was a herd community?
Oh boy. Okay. I feel like when it comes to mosques and things like that kind of targeted violence, I'd say there's a community of people who have the same kind of paradigms. Yeah, just those sort of rationales. They kind of influence each other. I think in that particular case, he had a gripe, but he was able to, like an echo chamber, kind of reinforce that gripe himself. That would inform what he wrote, and then bang, I'm going to go do this, you know? So these things are nuanced, but I think there is always a community of people that reinforce each other, but to what extent people act by themselves and actually go on the limb themselves, that's what I'm talking about, like lone wolf. That not really affiliated with a group. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about.
A lot of the like books and things that I've read recently and podcasts I've listened to have been about motivation and like what motivates somebody to do something. Yeah. And from a lot of my personal research, not an academic, but the most actionable people are people that are running towards something but equally running away from something.
Right.
So they say that people are more motivated to run away from than to run to. So if you've got somebody that's had like a really difficult childhood, and they've got a particular goal, they can find motivation in a lot more ways to pull away from where they were than perhaps somebody that's had a better childhood that still wants the same goal but is working towards rather than working away.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the people we're talking about, these kind of like lone wolves, there's probably an element of both where they're running away from certain things and they're running to something because they feel displaced. So either place, they're in the middle, there's no belonging. Yeah. So it's like if I run away and I do this will hopefully run me to this place, but they always still end up in that middle.
You touched on the word that, again, like kind of directed my research, belonging and looking for a community, looking for a home. The social contract is this idea whereby like the state kind of has a responsibility, like a duty of care to its civilians. Often when you think about coups and like any kind of disruption, dictatorships, people challenging dictatorships, it's because they're like, we don't think we're being taken care of. When people don't feel like they're being taken care of, they will either fix the problem themselves or find a community to join so they can mope around like, oh my gosh, I'm really sad about it. They reinforce each other and then someone does something. And that's kind of what I think is happening here. People kind of band together, they're dissatisfied. And that is it's a comfort, but then on top of that, it's like an impetus to go do something about it.
Someone like Kevin Samuels or Andrew Tate comes in and essentially galvanizes that group and leads them in a certain trajectory. Is that what it is?
Okay.
What was that reaction? I can tell you've got ammo on this one.
Do you know what it is for me?
R.I.P. Kevin Samuels.
In fact, yeah, it's true. R.I.P.
A king.
The thing about Samuels,
second coming.
Our king.
Yeah, second coming.
I'm going to just be quiet. It's fine. Not our king.
I'll go.
Oh no, guys, we're doing so well.
Big up KS.
Oh, okay. So the reason why I find that problematic,
go on,
is because I don't feel like he positioned himself to be the spokesperson of to kind of show the views of men. And I really feel like you lot's views are completely like...
We need to hear them.
We need to hear them. I'm not going to lie. Like, quite frankly, society teaches you to bottle your feelings in. Society teaches you to be a certain way, and it's to protect your image. And we don't look up to women. I don't look up to men who are weak, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And so it reinforces them. So your views needed to be heard. However, the way in which he talked to his guest on the show, madness. Like,
you have to be insensitive.
Madness.
But is it a madness from an emotional standpoint or objectively based on what he said?
Both. I'll tell you what it is.
Okay.
If I had a daughter and they were fat, like, I wouldn't talk to her about her weight the way he was talking about women.
What's your background country-wise?
Oh, I'm Ghana. I'm from Ghana.
You're Ghanaian. Because my mum is a Nigerian.
Yeah.
There's no chill when it comes to fat people.
Here's the deal.
And my mum's big herself. So, like, she's not like, but she's big. Like, so, but if she wanted to cuss up my sister for putting on a bit of weight, she's not.
Yeah, like, but put it this way, when my sister, because I'm into training, she got a bit big. My dad was, over summer, we got to lose like 20 to 25 kg with me. Like, in front of my sister, my dad says, it's got to the stage where before you go to school and people start saying things about you, you need to start training with your brother.
Okay.
And he got the results.
Okay. So
And she's grateful now. But
this is the thing. I feel like,
Feelings.
but these feelings are informed and based on like more like a psychological thing.
Okay.
The way in which you deliver a message is important. You might get the result, but you don't know what's happening in here. You don't know what's happening in there. That you just don't know. And so I am all for telling someone, mate, you know, if you have their best interest at heart and if you know that they are unhappy with it, you know, there's a way to communicate that. I'm a straight talker, but there's a way to use tact.
You're so right, though.
There's a way to use tact. And so I feel like Samuel I think he was intentionally saying what he wanted to say to invoke a certain reaction. But on top of that, he also, in some cases, lacked tact.
No, I don't disagree with that because
And that's my issue with
I think when you're talking to men, and I've always said this, that, you know, men like to communicate overtly. It's okay just to say daily, go turkey and fix your hairline. But women like to be communicated more.
I'm in Harley Street, don't worry.
It's more covert. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. That's important. So I understand that. Even the book, this man's pissing me off. The Ways of the Superior Man talks about it and breaks it all down, like in the balance of masculine and feminine. That, you know, when you are talking to women, that there is a way to present information that is accepted. Because you might say the exact same thing in two different ways and it's going to be received entirely different ways.
But in terms of, I hear that, but in terms of sensationalism, it's like when you're looking at results, Kevin Samuels would have never have been of big and the message would have never have got there if he didn't do what he did. Similar to when I looked at the time, and my friend who joined Marines, he actually nearly came to blows over it. At the time when Michael Adebolaja killed Lee Rigby, God rest his soul, I actually watched his speech at the time. And in his speech, he says, I don't want to do this killing. And on the long lines, he's sorry for killing this innocent man. But if I were just to go and just peacefully say, stop killing my brothers in Syria, peacefully, nothing would change. So he has to do something nuts for him to get the results he wants. And that's not me being a terrorist before people.
No, I'm not hearing that. No.
But I'm saying sometimes you have to go to these extremes. Yep. Similar to how Malcolm X had to go to the extremes so Martin Luther King could be heard. Yeah.
Did you guys hear about the Stop Oil campaign and they disrupted the
They did it by my work. They would like break in the
right?
Yeah.
What was it? Snooker? Was it darts?
Snooker.
Yeah. So I was listening to the Guardian.
Yeah, I saw that.
It was a madness. We had people doing, oh no, people have been working all night making sure that snooker's going to run smoothly out day. They come and do this, and then you have the other people that were like, listen, if we said this in a way that was jeje, it's not going to hit. It's not going to slap. We need to hear this where it hurts. So in the one hand, I do agree with those things, but I think when it comes to people's emotions, and that's why I think my issue is with Samuels, he was talking to women who were hurt. These women were coming onto the show. Why? I don't know. They were literally offering themselves up sometimes. But you know crazy. What? It's crazy. Fine. It's fine. It's not. It's fine. I'm actually annoyed. But because I'm annoyed, because why would you do it to yourself? But they were on the show. They were asking for help, and they already felt that they belonged to a certain family of people. They felt that they deserved a certain caliber of men. And it wasn't, you could say it was delusional, but that's what they believed. How can you break down someone's sense of reality so harshly?
Because that's what was necessary in order to change their perspective. Like, some people, you just need to tell them the legitimate truth in order to accept what it is, because they've probably been told in the past, or they probably know deep within, there's a reason why this man's not staying with me, or there's a reason why I can't acquire this particular man that I want.
And then
Here comes Kate Samuel to be like, yo, listen, this is the genuine fact. And it's a human condition to seek comfort. So there was a saying that lessons not learned in blood are soon forgotten. And the reason for that is because unless something dramatic happens to someone, the ability to change becomes more difficult, especially as you age.
And as you said, like, so harshly, but I feel that's a very female-led argument. The reason I say that is if you're a short, fat, broke man with a miffy hairline and you think you're the guy, and then you go to the club and all you get is this in your face, that's a very harsh reality. You're very straight. They would be thinking, oh, you know what? You're not. Women don't have time to say like, oh, you're not. They will just tell you and put their hand in your face. Like, what makes you think you're qualified to chat to me? Loads of women will say, oh, I'm not like that. But we know there's loads of women like that, whether you're like that or not.
I think people pick and choose. So when I was a teenager, I was quite overweight, a lot bigger than I am now. And everybody was like polite about me being overweight. Like my mum might be like, oh, you're putting on a few extra pounds, like da-da-da-da-da. When I then went to the complete opposite and I got really skinny, nobody gave a shit about coming up to me and telling me I looked ill. Nobody cared about, oh, you're a bit too skinny. Oh, you need to put weight on. Oh, you need to do this. But I think there's a difference between when you're delivering a message and you're delivering a personal message about somebody individually. Like when you're talking about somebody's appearance or their religion, their belief or something that's integral to who they are, to sit there, even as a man or a woman, and say you're not going to have an emotional response is ridiculous. Because if you didn't have an emotional response, why do men get in these stupid fights after a nightclub because one man looked at him funny? You're emotional. And it might not be the emotional in the sense, because when we think of emotional, we think of like some blubby girl crying her eyes out because some man left her. But emotion doesn't have to be an outward reaction. It can be completely inwards. And I think that's what you were saying. It's about the effect that it has on the inside of that person. And you can say certain things, but like, some things, I think it depends on your intention. Obviously, if you're coming on a podcast and you're freeing yourself up, you're giving yourself to be a target. But if it's somebody that you care about, there's a way of delivering a message that isn't in front of people, that isn't a public thing to shame them into doing or thinking certain things.
But bring it back to youth extremism. Someone like a Kevin Samuels or an Andrew Tate. How do you think it's influenced the youth?
I think identity crisis or the discovery of self is something that we all go through. And I think when young people, and I'm going to say young from between maybe like, what Gen Z is? I don't know.
Gen Z is 1996.
Okay, from that age group, like that year group upwards, you're trying to discover yourself. And I think when you are told, hey, success looks like this, having X amount of women, pulling X amount of girls on a night out, going on these kind of holidays, having this amount of money. If that's being constantly told to you, I think people can internalize that.
But as mandem, do we not see that though?
I think
like we go out there and see, okay, the girls, because the biggest myth that you're taught by, especially single parents, is like, talk to women this way. This is the kind of women that girls like. And when you go out there in the wide world, this guy's not respecting women, this guy's running through her and all her mates, and then her mates still like him, and you're starting to break down like all these things that you're told by, say, your mother that they don't, but you're starting to see a lot of women.
I think most people, parents-wise, they tell you things in how they would want to be treated. So a mother will tell you how to treat a woman because that's how she would want to be treated herself. It doesn't necessarily mean like in reality that's going to play out the way that we want it to, but I think
does maybe as a big woman, but at that age, did she even want to be treated like
that? But I think there's a difference. It's not necessarily it's how she wants to be treated in the moment she's having a conversation, because there's a difference between being in front of an attractive man and how you want to be treated in that moment, and talking to your son as a woman about treatment of women. The mentality at the time is completely different. As a man, you'd be able to objectively look at the situation and say, bro, this is what you do. As a woman, women don't chase men. So the ability to say what needs to be done at the time isn't never going to equate to the reality.
That's true.
I'm here thinking about the extent to which this is extremism or not.
Okay.
Like at what point do we go from opinions, communities of people thinking in the same way to it becoming an
radical.
Right.
Well, what is extremism in this context?
Thing. Like in this context or generally speaking?
In this context.
In this context. Okay. So in my opinion, extremism in this context would be, if there was like So we're always talking about like incel violence, the violence that comes because of a group of people feeling aggrieved because they don't get a lot of women, for instance. The moment you start, in my mind, acting physically, harming people because it's having an impact on you and that's how you feel, this is becoming extreme. I think the discourse becomes super, super extreme if no one else has the ability to challenge that. This is a fundamental, it's kind of... it's marketed as a fundamental fact. Like, we completely agree, say this is the way we're going to live, this is the way that men should treat women, this is what all masculinity should look like. There's no room for idiosyncratic behavior. It's only going to be, this is it, and no one can say anything. This is probably, we're getting to proper extremism. Right now, I still say there's a few voices. There is a dominant voice. I think this manosphere thing, there's a domination, but there's still people able to say things. There's still challenges to that. There's still guys that are not subscribing to this thing. Do you know, the moment it becomes like
dogmatic,
right? And it's marketed as somewhat universal. This is it. And if anyone else like tries to challenge it, forget it.
I'm going to challenge you on that without naming, but don't certain religions preach that? So wouldn't some religions... But if you take it in, follow it to the T, would that not be a form of extremism going on that same rationale?
Are you asking me, are you saying, are the religions that...
Listen, the inability to question...
Got it.
Inability to question, and this is the truth, and you must follow this. Wouldn't that be... A lot of religions would be extremists.
I agree, I see. Okay. I feel like religion can be used as a tool of extremism, I think, for sure. I think the way in which you package a message, sure. So when religions, when different like faith, I'm thinking, for instance, Khomeini, for instance, when he was sorting out the Iranian Revolution, people are like, is he a fundamentalist? Is he an extremist? Because he was so,
driven by his cause.
Fine. And the way he like packaged it, it was so fundamental. I agree, but I also disagree in that religion that says, quite frankly, this is what we believe, that's it then. And they're not forcing people to believe it, but they're unapologetic of their beliefs, that's fine. If you start forcing people, so for instance, if Christians were going around forcing people by force, I'm thinking about
Crusades.
Right? I'm thinking about
slavery.
All of those things. What happened in Latin America, for instance, like literally telling the indigenous people to believe in like Christianity, right? And like sticking them on crosses and burning them because they weren't taking Catholicism, that is extremism. I don't even care. I'll say it straight up. But to say I unapologetically believe something, it's a fact to me. Whatever you do about that, that's your business. But I'm just straight with how I think.
Can I throw a question out there? So for you, would you deem extremism as a negative? Because I feel like...
I think it has negative connotations.
But wholly, you can be extremist with something so positive. Like if I was an extreme
fitness fanatic,
or an extreme advocate for I don't know, like a child's disability charity, am I an extremist? Because I feel like the extremist term only comes in when there's a negative connotation.
Absolutely.
But we don't
That's a good
put
point.
extremism.
I don't know. I don't know.
Is that seen
I have a response, but I'll let you go ahead.
I don't know if it can, because obviously we always go by the saying like everything in moderation. Once you're willing to go to the extreme to achieve whatever it is you're trying to achieve, things can often become negative and dangerous.
Yeah.
So often when you see things at the extreme, it's reached a problem, regardless of whether it started off good.
Yeah.
Got it.
Hitting the extreme might become bad.
For sure.
But I agree, like wholeheartedly. But to your point, I feel like there is like a governmental strategy.
Yeah.
So for instance, like there was a group of like women who were campaigning against like being raped and stuff like that. I think that particular group, the name escapes me, were labeled by the US government as terrorists, in fact. Like, see the point? It's strategic.
You like Pussy Riot and
stuff like this. Like it has okay, great. So now, because it has a governmental challenge, we're going to call you a terrorist. And the same with extremism. Like we're going to label you extreme because of. So I think that has a political thing. But I agree with you, like massively. Like, I think the moment you're willing to, how far are you willing to go
to achieve this?
To achieve a goal. And I think because you're willing to, the nuances, like. One could argue if you're willing to die for a cause and you're willing to commit suicide for a cause, that could be framed as extremism in that it's an extreme, it's the most out there.
It's the strongest stance. you could take.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then if you're not harming anyone but yourself, to what extent is that like extremism in the sense that we all know it?
Yeah,
be?
like if that guy had not gone on the bridge and killed somebody, but actually stood there with a big microphone, gave a massive speech, and then shot himself in the head,
Exactly.
would he be deemed as a terrorist?
Or would then we don't
Would
talk
that
about
be deemed as
martyrdom.
extremist?
This is the thing. Like, so for instance, and I'll just say it, if it has like an undertone of like, we often hear about, like, we're hearing about right-wing terrorism and all that sort of thing. But initially, when I was writing up my thesis, I was looking at just like mainly like ISIS, that sort of thing. Now, if they had that kind of, if they were sympathetic to that cause, didn't harm anybody, but died sympathetically to that cause, I guarantee you a media outlet somewhere would have called them some sort of terrorist or extremist.
Yeah.
But they didn't harm anybody. They didn't kill everyone. They killed themselves. They died for that. Why can't they be a martyr for what they believe?
Yeah, and this is where the definitions of things, like I believe the government, a bit like what we were talking about earlier, they changed certain definitions to fit the agenda that they're trying to push.
Political communication is massive. Earlier you were like, am I like an academic? I'd go more like, sure, academic, but also like a journalist, because I feel as if like the way in which the narrative of certain outlets, media outlets, it's just so strategically framed, you're conditioned to think in a certain way.
If you want to be an honest academic, you have to be a journalist,
Straight up.
because otherwise you're too conditioned in their pathways of learning.
I think now we're going to talk about like knowledge construction and all of that, and I won't even get into that. I think the danger of, I love my job, I love being an academic to a degree, but I think I'm in a straitjacket all the time. I can't say anything without having empirical backed up research. Everything needs to be grounded in a certain type of way, which means that only certain types of knowledge qualify for evidence. So when I'm talking about youth extremism, tape, blah, 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 I'm looking at like the papers, what have people written on this stuff, and how can we prove there's actual influence? Okay, we can prove that because we can't prove that there's massive influence, but we can prove that there's a positive relationship because he's got a lot of followers. But I can't say he's literally influenced all of these different people because I'm not in all of their brains. I can't argue that.
People won't know that they've been influenced.
But it's funny you say that, because Helen Pluckrose, I think Queen Mary University, she talks, so you've spoken about how you have to do it from an empirical standpoint, but she does a lot of her work, and I've watched a lot of it. She talks about, but what about the fear of now academics will not take academic positions based on the political landscape? So it's actually going to, because we look up to you guys as, we base what we know to be fact of you guys, but if you're now being influenced from other people's implicit bias and political ideas,
It's a bit
what do you? Yeah,
about the would you do a trial study on black men and white men in athletics?
Yeah, you just wouldn't, because of the political.
Politically, it's going to cause a lot of problems if you try to say based off of race or ethnicity that this is this. A lot of people won't enter into academic study for the fear of judgment.
Beard gang members been connecting beard since 2019. It's been a while since I've done one of these. Huh?
Yeah, I know, you're looking a bit frosty.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, my beard's still looking, you get me?
I've grown mine now.
You get me? The beard's still looking good, because what did the girls say? You come with a bearded personality. That means you come with Jess. Yeah? So you want to grow a strong beard, you know where to go. Beard gang members.
Okay, so I did some research with a lovely friend of mine for just after the murder of Floyd, and we were looking at systemic racism and institutional racism and the way in which young people in London and across the UK feel that. So we did focus groups. We wrote up the research so conservatively because the culture of academia demands that you have to prove everything. And that's why I say I feel like I'm a little bit in a straitjacket with it, because how do I prove that when I went to the GP, the guy looked at me funny and said, you're not going to be in that much pain? And how do I say that, it was because of the fact that he thinks... So obviously there's a lot of like discourse and literature on like, like people being used for injections and all sorts of things like anesthetic, etc. There is evidence there, but academia it likes to play it safe. So when we think about like Marx, when we think about the people that really were challenged for saying stuff, when we think about like, Mao, the communists of the world. When we think about people who literally push the boundary, even Gandhi sometimes, I'm thinking about these people who push the boundaries of things that they were saying, they didn't do it within academia. So as much as I like to be called an academic, I'm also like, I have the research skills to make sure that everything I say is substantiated, but I also have me.
And I think that works better for you in the sense that, like, the perception of academics, I think, for me personally, is like they're kind of like above us in knowledge, whereas the way that you speak is very personable. It's very, I feel very on the same level as you. I don't feel like talked down to, but I found that a lot of people that have been in the academic system for like 10, 20 years, they don't even realise it, but the way that they speak to people that don't come from that particular background, it's like earlier when you referenced Jess and you're like, oh, but it's your feelings. But essentially, like when you're judging situations on racism and like microaggressions, it's your feelings you have to use to judge those and to figure out whether was that this or was that that. And you can't always prove it, like you said.
Prove intuition.
But you can't prove a negative. So
no.
So just a slightly caveat. So what is the kind of effect between family and the radicalisation as well?
Yeah, I think family is a community where you feel like you have purpose and you feel like you have meaning and you feel like you belong.
Just to clarify, when you say family, do you mean like blood family or do you mean families in the community?
Community.
Okay, cool.
I think people get enticed because they were looking in the first place. They were looking for something else in the first place. And along the line, someone else gave them something instead. And it was
like an olive branch.
Yeah, and it was down another path. I think about radicals, like radical females, like women going, the reasons why women go into like terrorist organizations versus men. Often I read that women get promised that they can help, that you can nurture, that you can be a part of, a community to like make younger people's lives better. And then they end up being brides or like prostitutes for, But the selling point is what gets me, And also I found it really interesting that some terrorist groups, so ISIS, like those terrorist groups, like would use. Interestingly, the top one that I found was Facebook. But Facebook,
Facebook is madness. Facebook is like, crazy.
No, Zuckerberg.
What would you expect?
Do you know what it was? I thought it was going to be. It is though. I thought it was going to be more like chat rooms.
Okay.
4chan. Well, that's for something else. But like, I thought it was going to be like, chat rooms where you can talk. And to be fair, it does go there. We can never follow. We can see where it starts on Facebook, but we can't see what happens afterwards.
A lot of these like groups, people that do things they shouldn't to children as well, they all start on Facebook and then they'll direct them to dark websites,
there we
chat
go.
sites,
That's
where
how it
you
works.
can then go and have more private conversation, but they'll try and find their broader community and then they bring them into the dark areas. And
this is it. But the way they do that, so your question, Eddie, your question was like, how does it link with family? The way in which they entice is, come, we've got a family. Come,
it's grooming.
You can be part. Yeah, you can be part.
So then what is the have you understood the process in what is going on with the individual that makes them so susceptible to manipulation when they're seeking out something?
Okay, I'm not going to say fundamentally this is going on with anybody, but if I was to speculate, it could be, if I can use like the flat earthers as an example. I'm not trying to say flat earthers are I'll use the flat earthers as an example. I think what goes on is people feel like they've been shunned by a part of society. Maybe they just feel like a bit of a misfit. So if it's at school, they're being bullied or they can't find a job. If it's like the Arab Spring, anything that says I don't belong anywhere could make someone susceptible to a different type of narrative.
I don't want to get caught too much on the LGBTQ community because we steer clear of that.
Okay.
But a lot of what Matt Walsh talks about is a lot of people who are joining such movements, specifically the trans movement, and I have to say for YouTube, this isn't my view, this is Matt Walsh's. He says a lot of them are the misfits, like the severe misfits of society. And the fact that group is inclusive of absolutely everyone, it's almost like they may start to identify as that just because finally I feel accepted as somewhere. So then they start going down this pathway, and so many people have actually taken the chop and been like, actually, I was just depressed at the time and I found purpose.
Yeah.
Have you been able to draw comparisons between modern day psychology and historical psychology? Because arguably, I'd say that people of
Oh, it's that
It's next government.
yeah.
This is gonna happen.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one that doesn't have it.
Well, you don't have it yet. Have you got internet?
Yeah. Okay.
Is mine going off?
yeah.
That was an interrupt from the UK government. We do apologise.
The next one is real.
We talk about extremism and then
Yeah, so because I'm of the idea that previous generations were more resilient, more they were able to combat personal issues more so than modern day. But have you managed to draw a comparison between the susceptibility of modern day individuals to join these groups compared to people of previous generations who may have been more resilient?
And leading on that, him asking the questions, I get where he's drawing that because a lot of corporations, that's what they say now, that Gen Z and millennials are lazy.
Yeah. In my opinion, in my informed opinion, I think it's pretty constant.
Okay.
I think we should make the distinction between work ethic, mental strength, and the decision to apply your life or to commit your life towards a different trajectory. Those are two different things. I think people and their inability to wake up to go to work, not to trivialize, but yeah, or to kind of go through difficulties and be on antidepressants is one thing. What's happening with the people that get drawn into groups is they are kind of resilient. In fact, like you were saying, they are quite resilient, but they just feel like they have nothing to channel that towards. That's the difference.
Is that a modern thing, or is that?
No, I think it's constant.
Happened?
I think it's constant.
It's constant.
I think it's constant. I think there's two things happening. I think experts have termed young people to be, because of the fact you're hormonal, you're going through puberty, you're going through all of these kind of biological things, they've termed you to be more vulnerable. And I think that might not be as accurate as they think, in my opinion.
Vulnerable in different ways.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's a continuum. That can happen later in life. So that's the reason I'm saying it's constant, because I think earlier on people thought it was like that and they've just labelled young people that way without really thinking if that's really the case. There was like moral panic around like wearing like hoodies and stuff. The point I'm making is that hasn't changed. Like just because we've got like Gen Zers, it doesn't mean that they are any less resilient in that way as it pertains to like extremism. They just are less resilient in other ways. It's just constant.
What about the suicide statistics?
How does suicide speak to radicalisation?
How does it?
Yeah. Like how does someone going through like suicide, like if they didn't get their grades at school and radicalisation and going into a terrorist group speak to each other?
So I was talking more in the sense of the resilience of the mind. So if people were just as resilient as they were previously, then arguably there wouldn't be as much suicide, the sharp increase in suicide rates that we see now compared to previous.
And can't herd communities push you to do suicide? Like, oh, I'm depressed too, let's top ourselves.
But also with resilience, you have to think about it like, a slice of bread. Like you do have a limit. You don't know what that limit is. Nobody knows what their limit is, but every time you're having to use that resilience, a little bit's been taken away. And if this person who's disenfranchised is not getting topped up by other parts of their life, whether that be their family, their job role, their this, their that, their the other, at some point that resilience can break, essentially, because we all have like a battery that needs topping up and we don't realize it. We don't even half the time know what tops our batteries up, but the society around us, whether it's eating, conversation, relationships, it kind of tops us up. But I feel like a lot of the people we're speaking about, they're quite disenfranchised from society. They're quite isolated. So their kind of batteries never being topped up. So the resilience, I would imagine, over time would depreciate.
Yeah, and I agree with you. But when you ask me the question of resilience, I'm assuming it came from, because you were asking like comparatively, has it reduced, whatever. I feel like you're asking me that question because maybe you could be thinking that resilience is the reason why people, or lack of resilience is the reason why people are joining these groups. And I'm arguing, no, I don't think it's lack of resilience. No.
So what do you think it is?
I think it's alienation. I think it's looking for a home. I think it's wanting to be part of a movement. I think it's literally a societal thing. I think actually the most resilient people that actually follow through with these things. Many youths get to like the border and go, actually, I want to go home now. I want to go home now. Their lack of resilience brings them back because they realize they actually can't follow through with it. I think the reason they're going towards it is, like you were saying, they're looking for something. And it sounds very, very, very like wishy-washy, but I'm telling you.
No, I think it makes sense.
That's literally what I think it is.
On a personal level, and I didn't plan to share this today, but when I was 16, I tried to take my own life for whatever personal reasons. And God, why was I saying this? There was a reason to this.
Resilience?
Resilience.
Yeah, like I feel like, oh God, I've completely lost it.
It happens.
It happens. But basically, like sometimes you can't see past anything else. Like I felt so disenfranchised. I didn't feel like connected to anybody. I didn't feel like anybody understood what I was going through. At the time, I know now that I had ADHD as well. So I was going through trying to figure out that as a teenager. I was also in an abusive relationship, and that happened to be my first relationship. So all of those things in once made me feel like I didn't belong at work, I didn't belong at school, I didn't belong with my family, and I didn't belong with my partner. And out of everybody that had known me back then, if you'd have asked any of my friends, they would have all told you I am the least likely to do this. I'm the strong one. I'm the one that like is resilient or whatever. But I'm also the one that picked up the tablets and took them. And a bit like you said, the resilient people will end up doing it because they can't see anything else. I didn't see any other option. Obviously, I'm older and wiser now. And it was a very stupid thing to do. But I have to give myself grace at the time because I couldn't see. I genuinely couldn't see. I remember literally after I'd taken the tablets, sobbing, thinking, I don't want to die, but I don't want to live.
Yeah. So,
and how do you deal with that when you're a young person? It's really difficult. And then there's not a lot of like in our generation, like when I was younger, we'd have youth groups, you'd have educational maintenance allowance, you'd have connections workers, you'd have different places that you could go, and even that wasn't enough for me then. But now they've taken away all these services from people, so those same people that are feeling that way, where they can't get it from all of the other places, you know, we're talking about the government have a duty of care, they can't even access it on a system level, so it's really hard for people.
And when you were talking, I had a couple of brainwaves. The first thing I thought about was young people needing guidance, and how just because you need guidance, it doesn't make you any less resilient. It just means you lack in wisdom in some place. I think the vulnerability that often young people are framed or labelled as being in that category is actually less about vulnerability, but like a lack of wisdom.
Well, I was going to say, obviously, we've spoken a lot about labels. Do you think a lot of labels are overly sensationalized?
Yes.
And the reason why I asked that question, for you to expand, you might not be aware, but there's another academic scholar called William Costello, and I think he's in Ireland. I can't remember what university, but he specializes in incel research. So he's the first incel researcher, and what he actually said in his findings is that everyone talks about incel. Cool. Let me punch up women. Let me do. He said most of these men are actually a support group. He said 90% of them are depressed. And I only think like 5% of them actually had violent tendencies towards women. It was more like, I can't get a woman, I want to kill myself. But then what we know an incel to be is like the mad Andrew Tate follower who says, let me just punch up women.
I mentioned the word moral panic. That's what that is. When there's a sentiment that's whipped up to like overly sensationalize, overly emphasize a group of people and shed them in a certain light that might be inaccurate. I don't know too much about this guy's research, but I do think it seemed to be a community of what I looked at with regards to incels. It seemed to be a community of men who feel the same way and are having a kumbaya session.
So what would be the solution to mitigating these people, potentially joining these groups that could radicalize them, or is the solution within the group in itself just that sometimes it just goes the wrong way?
Should we define radicalize them before we go to solution? Because I feel like I've talked about the notion of extremism and like the end point, but like the journey of radicalization needs to be accounted for. So I have a question for you guys and ladies as well. What do you think radicalization is? Like, how would you define it?
That's a good question, boy.
It's like the process of going from normal to extreme, almost. That's how
I'd say for someone that by society standards and the status quo would be, so extremism's on a spectrum, I suppose, not in the middle, but not on the extreme end of that spectrum, and then the catalyst to then take you to that extremism.
What I guess, what would be the difference between extremely educated on a subject and being radicalised on a subject?
There we go. That's what I was
Because that's where I find it a little bit difficult, because is it the action that makes you radical? Because everybody's had radical thoughts, but none of us are radical extremists. So where does it change? Is it when you change your thoughts to an action? I don't know, like
it's what you were saying, Adi, like the journey. It's the journey towards extremism is basically, in layman's terms, how we would define it. But I think what that journey looks like is different person to person.
Yeah.
I think when you talked about more or less educated, I'd say the like most clearest form of radicalization is if we were able to prove that somebody didn't initially have a particular line of thinking, were then exposed to it, adopted it, and they were shifting along the scale towards the extremist view. Like if they were already incubating certain, feelings, I'm not saying that you're on the same kind of level of radicalization or that journey as the other person. You're just not, because you've already got those tendencies. So this is the thing. I think if we're talking about, and this is like influence and how we can actually prove like proper causation, we can't, because there's no way to measure inside a human how much a person knows, how much they adopted, where it came from, and then how they're enacting that. You cannot measure that.
Doesn't insight and decision science seek to do that in terms of influencing how people behave to achieve an end goal?
I feel like, okay, I don't really know much about that. But is it experimental?
So it's essentially like, it's a guy called Edward Bernays, essentially just an understanding of the programming of the human mind. Okay. Normally for consumerism is what is.
Oh, got it. But then, okay, fine, sure. And that's kind of like, it reminds me of AI. You could always do some research into figuring out how someone thinks, or what's going to influence them to clicking or to buying. But you don't have an indication of what they knew before. You never know the starting point.
So according to Dr. Google, radicalisation is when an individual or group adopt an extreme political or social or religious view that can lead to violence. This is why the term is often used when referring to those who carry out or encourage acts of terrorism.
The operative word for me in that definition is adopt. How do you measure
the
point of adoption?
There we go. That's why I don't get into discussions about what caused what. Nah, it happened. Was the internet a tool? Was there a community, helping get them there? Sure. But because I never know that starting point, I can't really say. But the reason I was going on about the radicalization journey was for a reason, and I can't remember the reason. I'm not gonna lie. But I asked the question because of something. I was like, I don't remember.
Because you originally
I think it was the journey towards getting to radicalisation was the journey towards getting to extremism.
Yeah.
So I think it was something to do with that.
Then I feel like you mentioned something
about William Costello and the incels, about them being depressed. Kumbaya session.
Basically, I just think radicalisation is happening. What causes it to happen is difficult to say.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think people are aware they're being radicalised?
Oh.
Because I feel like there's two different groups there. I think there are people that make a conscious decision, fuck the establishment, I'm going to go and believe this and I'm going to chuck myself into it. But then I think there are people that are, and this is where maybe the Andrew Tate's come in a bit more, that are drip-fed little bits of information over time and then slowly become radicalised.
Like, even an example, like the ones that say against their will is the stereotypical guy who goes to uni, not got many friends, get radicalised to become a terrorist and fight in Islam. And then the ones that are conscious would be the geezer who got beaten up by a black kid and he's like, I'm going to be on fuck black people. Let me just go take knowledge that makes me more radical.
And to be fair, I think those labels are problematic. It was labels that we were on. Those labels are problematic. I just think, does a person know they're being radicalised? Yeah, sometimes. But I think that often that they're targeted. So what you talked about, just about the guy who's by himself at university, hasn't got much friends. He has a label. He's open for it. He's not asking for it, but it makes the job easier. I think you go for a certain type of person because they have the mindset for the message to land. Is what I think.
Well, I suppose grooming kids is and not sexual. I'm talking about grooming them to send them to the country to sell drugs or whatever. Yeah. That's a form of radicalisation.
I think so. I think so. I think that's.
But do you know what? I'm going to phrase something that's probably a little bit.
No, but the reason why the reason why I say it's a form of radicalisation, everyone's like, selling drugs, but when you become into that world, it then becomes normal to stick knives into people, and the argument for that is one of the most inhumane things, that you're now disconnected from society. I just feel like
there's been a lot of sensationalism around young people selling drugs, country, and all of this kind of stuff. One of my friends, her ex-partner was the first person in the Thames Valley to get charged with child grooming or like he's got a child grooming order because apparently he recruited young people to sell drugs, but he's never been charged with it. So he has a police order on him for grooming and essentially pushing a radicalisation, but he's never been charged with it. So how can you have an order on somebody that they've never been charged with?
But then when you're talking, I also feel like radicalisation is intentional, as in the person who's doing the radicalising that's the intentional part.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that we often look at like the emotions of a young person that needs guidance, doesn't have much wisdom and how to make sound choices. But actually the onus is on the person who's actually going out, finding these people and giving them a certain message.
Does he know he's doing it though?
Yeah, 100%. I think, so for instance,
Sorry. Take here.
Oh crap!
No, just no radicalisation.
No,
I was just talking about radicalisation.
Radicalised,
I don't think all the time, you know.
No.
Radicalizers though.
Oh my god! I think
how do you think they go through? But how do you think they go through these like extreme traps of like, right, we're gonna make a woman, make a Facebook page, we're gonna get all of these people involved, we're gonna take them here, we're gonna do this. It's so strategic. It's not like
that's one type though. When I told you about grooming kids. Like, my young boy wants money. Let me put him on.
But they still sit there.
This is it. No. Like I was gonna say straight. They do know that they're radicalizing. No, if you think this is right, this is normal, this is okay. The way you're saying it like it's a fact.
Yeah.
This is just just come with me. You're not rad. It's actually we're genuinely promising you something. They don't see it in a bad way. So I do agree with that.
I know guys now who are like grooming's a charge, and they're like he wanted money. This is how I came up. I showed him how to make money. Now they say I'm a groomer. But I put him on.
Coercion, and they don't use that word enough. People get coerced into certain things. And a lot of these people that end up grooming young kids don't realise they were groomed themselves.
No, but I'm saying it's not a coercion. My young boy comes up to me and says, I'm broke, I want to make money. This is how I make money. Go on, do that.
Yeah, it's a means to an end that they're basically sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure.
But I think what doesn't happen is people don't account for the process of teaching them how to do that thing, and that being the element of grooming. And that's why I feel like both sides of two sides of the same coin. Like you're like, yeah, they do, but they don't. Because it's like, how could you not account for the actual teaching, the art of, whatever.
And there's a point where they realise they know what they're doing.
At that point, it's done now.
Yeah.
And at that point, and I guess, so if the person who's been groomed now realises that they've been groomed and then wants to go find their minions to go do it, and they're doing the same thing and teaching, it depends on how that person sees it. They could see it like you said. Oh, I just want to put someone on something. Yeah. Or it could be, you know what?
But look at this.
Isn't that what Tate would say though? Tate would say there's this group of men who are disenfranchised, who are seeking something. These men want women, money, status, essentially the things that make them attractive to women. I know what those things are.
Be like me.
So me as a... Yeah, exactly. So be like me. But then on the other side, people would see that as radicalisation. If you go to most schools, that they're teaching anti-Tate.
Because he's perpetuating this toxic masculinity and
is it toxic though?
Well,
it's maybe
because the women like that. Women like Tate, so it's not toxic.
People say that he himself is not toxic, but the people that you say that go around him, they're the toxic nature. So it's like, cool, you might have one person at the head of something that isn't that. If every single person underneath that is perpetuating that narrative, is it not that?
Also, did Tate not come and say something like, my sister is owned by her husband?
Yeah.
What kind of...
Yeah, that's mad. That's mad still. That's mad. That's mad.
Not having sex with her husband, and I'm like...
I'm sorry.
No, if you're not having sex with your spouse, whether you're a man or woman, you're used to
I think if you're married, sex is a duty.
It's
your
not
duty.
you should comment on publicly. Like if I had a brother and my brother is publicly commenting on my sex life without my permission, I'm raging.
Nice.
I don't care whether he says I'm A1 in the bedroom.
Well,
it's just not...
Yeah, but that's your but that's your feelings, though, man. A man can comment on whatever he likes, man.
I'm talking about the fact that he was talking about women being owned by something. That therein lies the toxicity.
Yeah, that's toxic. That's toxic.
That's my problem.
But the isolation. Sorry. But the isolation of what Eddie said, of the main message of girls like money, they like status, they like whatever the rest of it. You see, I'm lit. Everyone sees I'm lit. I'm lit. Women say I'm lit. Men say I'm lit. You want to be, if you want to live a good life, get lit like me and your life will probably be better.
Oh my God.
That's not really toxic though, because that's the reality.
But do you know what it is? Again, I don't want to generalize, but he's not saying just that though. His image isn't only that. It encompasses the thing I just said. And with that, I believe there is a viewpoint, there is a way that women are now viewed. like fine, like
Which is
like to be subservient. Like there's this. Remember the alpha, beta males, all of these things. There's a hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
And I think also with masculinity comes, or I don't want to say comes femininity, like femininity comes from masculinity, but more there are certain attributes that are associated with these labels, right? And so the toxic nature of those things is to say, okay, I have the money, I have the car, I have the whatever, I have all the things that deem me to be desirable. Now women should behave in a certain way because I have those things and because I now am desirable. Problem. We may like it,
but is he saying that women should?
Or women do? He's saying women do.
No, he's saying both. He's saying because women do now that they should. He's saying now it's like what came first, the chicken or egg? Like you like it, and now it's almost like to be expected that this happens. The reason I say that is because,
of course, because women are doing it.
No, but like not every woman wants to do that, and the woman who likes it and doesn't do that is less feminine now.
That's fine. No, but I don't think that's necessarily.
I don't think his message.
The message is it's not necessarily that you're less feminine. It's just that that's probably not the guy that you're attracted to. But the problem is that is the guy you're attracted to. So if women weren't attracted to that guy, then there wouldn't be a need for that type of conversation.
I get it. What I'm saying is, his message is be like me because women like this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm saying that's fine, but because he's doing be like me because women like this thing, he also talks about women in a certain way that positions women in a certain position, which is subservient to him. And that is the problem I'm having.
Is he talking about women based on how they behave or how? Because what you're saying is that women that are attracted to this man behave in a certain type of way, but then he talks about the way they behave and turns into an expectation. Now it's wrong for the men who are on the level of Andrew Tate to expect that of women. That's completely wrong. But then if you work your way up to that level, does it then not become an expectation based on how women behave once you hit that position?
Before we get to the behaviour part, I used his sister for a reason. I feel like, sure, there's two things happening here. We're talking about the way in which women behave when it comes to Tate, but also the way he views women, period.
As a result of their behaviour based on his position.
Oh, God. Is it...
But is that an excuse? Like,
no, it's just a fact.
Himself more on other women. That might just be his absolutely atrociously poor choice in women.
You say that though, but no one's gonna turn down the gal he's getting in it. No one.
Yeah,
most men, if there's
encounters though, not actual substantial relationships where people give a shit and they're very different.
But the people he's appealing to, that's what they're after, no?
Is it? Because I don't necessarily know that it is. I think most of the people that watch him are actually lonely as fuck and just want a woman to cuddle and have sex with.
Yeah, but if they had a choice, they'd have the things that Andrew Tate has over any other.
They don't have those things. As two men that get women, are you still sat there like, yeah, I want all of Andrew Tate's things. You can go get your own.
Well, like as a one night encounter, yeah, why not? That'd be great.
Yo, if I could bust you down,
this. Do we think he's an extremist? Do we think Tate and Samuels are extremists?
I think certain groups would think they were.
No.
Feminists would say that. I don't think he is.
I don't think he's an extremist, no.
No more extreme than a feminist.
I think he's got extreme viewpoints, and I think.
Wait, hold on. Sorry.
A radical feminist.
I am so sorry. What?
A radical feminist.
Define radical feminist.
It's like Pussy Riot. He's no more extreme than them.
Men on buses have to. Men on trains
have to close their legs.
Oh, right, that's actually on his acid on his balls.
You tried to catch me, but I used Pussy Riot and I spun out.
I was like, because I'm thinking he didn't just. Okay.
Yeah, no, time out. I'm talking about it's radical feminist.
Do I think Andrew Tate is extreme? Yes. Do I think he's an extremist? That's where it's like that ist is.
But extremist in what?
I think he's extreme in the way that he imbues himself, in the way that he delivers his message. I think his delivery has been extreme. Like, you went for a stage like 2 years ago, I'd never heard of this guy ever in my life, and then all of a sudden, it does not matter where I go, I cannot escape him.
He's the most Googled man on
100%, and that came from him putting an extreme plan in place to try and push out. Like, he knew that he was going to get cancelled. So what he
but he's a businessman. To be a good businessman, you have to be obsessed. He's just a good businessman.
No, not just that. Is Bill Gates extreme? Is Elon Musk extreme?
Yeah, I think they are. But there's a difference between extreme and extremist. To go and be extreme about something just means you're extra. You're going OT. But to be an extremist, for me personally, is when you start to take it a little bit.
So we agree he's not an extremist then, based on your rationale.
I don't think so. I don't think he's an extremist. Sorry.
Yeah. I think he's extreme, and I think he has some potential to influence people to become extremists, and that's where my Crocs with him.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
I love it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough.
I love a bit of that. Yeah, man. You nail on it, man.
I love that. But I have a question. If we think then that he's not an extremist, why are you saying that he's radicalising?
Based
I'll take a bit of that.
No, you're saying that like
on the rationale that Cherish just gave.
Oh, sorry, I misinterpreted. I thought you were saying that do we think that like Tate is radicalising people? And I was like, that would only make sense if he's an extremist, hence the question. But
No, but I don't think that's not Tate, that's people's misinterpretation.
But it comes back to responsibility, because the last guy we had on the pod, we had the same kind of discussion and we've had this time and time again. You might have an agenda, but once you get to a certain point of power, even like you have a responsibility for all of those people that follow you. Even, I'm not saying you're responsible for their actions, but Andrew Tate knows exactly the types of guys that follow him. He knows exactly the types of things that they'll do. Like, I'll put an extreme view out there. I guarantee you that at least 5% of the people, of men that follow Andrew Tate, have pushed a boundary with a woman at some point in their life. I'm not saying they've raped or but I'm saying they've pushed a boundary, they've done something.
But what more can he do apart from tell people that is wrong? Because on countless occasions, Andrew Tate has said, in order to live the life that I live, these are the sacrifices and things you got to do.
He talks about protecting women.
In anything that he says, do you not?
Not in violence towards women. No, he says it's not cool to rape women. He says it protects women.
Violence towards women doesn't have to be physical. Like you can be mentally abused, you can be psychologically abused. If a man is constantly making you feel like inferior for whatever reason it is, that is abuse in itself. Like I've been in an abusive relationship, and I can tell you hands down now, I can probably remember off the top of my head maybe 5 times I was physically hit. But I am dealing with the emotional scars as a 30-year-old woman. When this happened, I was 16. So the emotional side of things, I know we love to say, oh, women are too emotional. Yeah, we are, but that is us. That's not going to change. We're always going to be that. And so... But
what obviously the question is Andrew Tate himself, because we were talking about, let me finish in terms of, when we're talking about radicalisation, we might be talking about intentionally or unintentionally directly telling people to do things. Andrew Tate is putting out a message. If you go and misinterpret that message, so for example, let's say the Quran, the Quran is written in a peaceful way. If you go and take the Quran and go and do something nuts, that's not the Quran making people do it. If you misinterpret the message, that is on you.
But if you were a mum and you took the Quran and you went to a particular section of the community and you only went towards that particular section and you only went for certain paragraphs of the Quran, then you are going to radicalise.
But he's not doing that though.
You have that ability. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you have that ability. He has sub-targeted people that are from, sorry to say, but like weaker mindseted people. And he pushes that narrative, and up to maybe a certain point he didn't have the knowledge or understanding of his influence. But for anybody to sit there now and say Andrew Tate doesn't know the power that he holds and the influence he has on these young people is ridiculous. He knows
but this is my point. Like when you start going into that realms, we're gonna make all the rappers accountable. We're gonna make this bust down bad. Like, come on, like we're not gonna.
He has literally made a YouTube channel to talk to you directly. You chose to consume that.
So that's my point.
You chose to consume this, but with him, he is. The way it feels to me, he was inescapable. Like you couldn't go anywhere or click on any social media platform without finding him.
No,
they did some studies.
If I go to the club, I can't hear people getting shot. I'm not going to go shoot someone. But sorry, go on.
It's valid. They did a study. They created a new. I say they. I don't know who they are, but I read something somewhere. And they created a new like Instagram or like YouTube account, not affiliated to anything. It's brand new. 30 minutes. Tate comes up in it.
He was stressed.
But the point is, your point of him being inescapable is true, but that doesn't make him an extremist. I think he's positioned himself. The algorithms do a lot, but I think he's positioned himself as an icon. He's made himself an icon,
which is on the consumer.
Yes, because exactly. There's a consumer base for it. He's an icon. It's I believe some of those things are problematic, but that's just my opinion. Like, I don't think he's an extremist.
So that's what I'm saying. It's not because the fact is we're talking about, it's the algorithms. The fact that everyone wants to deplatform him. What happens is the algorithm, the fact that algorithms are people trying to engage with the content, that's on the consumer. They're going out and seeking this thing.
And algorithms are built by the business which push it to you. So essentially, if we're going to make Andrew hold some responsibility, then we have to look at these social media platforms that allow his content to keep being pushed and shared.
Why should we? So we're going to censor people? Where we're going to censor people posting other people's content? That doesn't make sense.
I mean,
Well, this is not North Korea. That doesn't make any sense.
I'm not saying this to people. What I'm trying to say is that if we, I believe there should be a level of accountability there for him. I'm not saying he's responsible for everything, but if I'm going to hold him accountable, then I have to hold the social media platforms accountable. That number one, deplatform him, but two, then still deplatform him and allow all of his content to be shared. So you're not actually deplatforming him. You're allowing all this stuff to be shared so you can still make your money, but you want to look like you're politically doing the right thing.
But there's a fantastic book, and I'd actually recommend you read it if you're interested in this stuff. It's written by a guy called Talaton Gillespie, and it's called Custodians of the Internet. These platforms didn't sign up to make political choices. Yeah. They're now put in that position, and I feel like we don't take that into account.
It's not fair for them.
That was never. It was meant to be free speech. It was meant to be open, and so now they are trying to be politically correct by taking him down, but they can't. To your point about the North Korea, they cannot then stop other people from doing it because it's a platform.
Yeah.
So by no fault of his own. May God forgive me, and I'm going to say this on this podcast. Andrew Tate could be a small genius. He's literally let the work do it for himself. He doesn't even have to be there. It's just being done himself.
Listen, I won't deny that the man is fucking clever. And would I sit down and have a couple of business lessons from him? Yes, I bloody would. I really would.
I'm just saying, but when it's flipped, so we're saying for him to take accountability. Are we going to go to all the 50-year-old hermit crazy cat ladies and start blaming Beyonce, all single ladies? Come on, man. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
And also the mode, sorry, darling, the mode is different. Tate is, when we hear about propaganda, speeches, rallies, that's the sort of we talked about radicalisation, but we haven't talked about indoctrination, something that, but Beyonce, I'm not saying that music can't be equally as indoctrinating, but it has a different kind of effect.
Yeah, Beyonce's fans are a bloody cult following.
Well, that's it.
They're a hands down cult following. If you want to mess with Beyonce, you'll have a whole tribe of people.
Yeah, it's true.
And she's talking about all single ladies, and then she's there with her husband who cheats on her. It's ridiculous.
In her music. Let's just not go there. But just drawing back to what I said, when I say responsibility, I don't necessarily mean that he should be punished or held accountable in a direct sense for random people's actions. But if we were to sit here and have him on this podcast, I wouldn't let him sit here and deny the fact that he knows what he's doing, the reach that he's going, and the fact that he might not be an extremist, but he knows that he is having influence on people that will take an extremist agenda.
Fine. Trump and what happened
100%.
on January.
Do you have because you have to run. Do you have any closing comments on the youth extremism?
I feel like my closing comment would be this: if we're going to talk about how to protect young people if they need protection, it will be more managing their emotions and giving them guidance and wisdom, and not underestimating them. I think they are tech savvy. I think they are very smart. I just think they need shaping, and I think often the people who do the radicalising take the position of guardian, and that's the problem. I think the internet is a fantastic tool promoting interconnection, etc., and things that were not possible are now being made possible. But I don't think that is the problem. I think it's a guardian thing. It's an ownership thing, and it's a guidance thing. So yeah, that's my conclusion.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Do you have any projects, anything you're working on? You're going to the US anyway.
I am going to
Are you going to be teaching out there as well?
Yeah, so I'm going to do a bit of teaching because that's what I've been doing for the past 5 years. But I also want to dabble in some journalism as well. So look out for my investigative posts.
See you on RT.
Hopefully.
Really?
No, hopefully. I don't know. I've got big plans, but I don't want to jinx it.
Okay then. I'll be watching.
See you on Vice.
I'll be there.
My dream. Oh my God, my dream. If anyone knows anybody that works there, tell me. Let me know.
But listen, people, like, share, subscribe.
Skia.